My name is Richard Hale, and I'm 52 years old enough to have lived through the kind of storms that shake a man to his bones, but somehow still naive enough to be blindsided by the one thing I never thought would happen in my life. See, I've always believed that if you raise a child with love, real love, the kind that keeps you awake at night, the kind that makes you hold their tiny hand just a little longer every time they tug away, that love comes back to you. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not immediately, but eventually. But life doesn't always follow the rules you think it should. Sometimes life walks right up to you, looks you dead in the eyes, and tears open a wound you didn't even know you were still bleeding from. That's exactly what happened the day my daughter, my only child, Emily, looked straight at me, her face stiff, her eyes flat like a shutter had come down behind them, and said, "Dad, don't come to the wedding." Those 6 words didn't feel like words. They felt like a punch. Like someone slipped a blade between my ribs without warning. Like the ground under me shifted and I had nothing to grab onto. Even now, repeating them makes my chest tighten. You can raise a kid from diapers to adulthood. You can work double shifts to buy them their first bike. You can sit in hospital rooms praying they'll recover from a fever. You can be the one who picks them up when they fall. But nothing prepares you for your own child shutting the door in your face at the moment you thought you'd be standing beside them. First, I honestly thought she was playing around. Emily was always a smart, sharp-tongued kid, the type who'd tease me for wearing the same pair of jeans too many days in a row or laugh at the way I still listened to old rock bands like they were brand new. She had humor in her blood, she got that from her mother, and usually when she talked to me, no matter how upset she was, there was at least a little spark in her eyes. A softness, a trace of the little girl I once tucked into bed. But on that day, there was no spark, no softness, no trace of the child I once carried on my shoulders through the county fair. Instead, her face was a wall, cold, still, emotionless in a way that scared me more than if she had yelled, cried, or slammed a door. I remember standing there, trying to swallow, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. My mind raced for explanations. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe the wedding planning had pushed her to the edge. Maybe someone hurt her, and she didn't want me to see the fallout. But deep down, in that gut instinct every parent has, I knew this wasn't just stress. She meant it. She meant every damn word. And knowing that, truly feeling the weight of it, broke something inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, in the kind of way that lingers, the kind that makes your heart feel heavy even when you're trying to stand tall. What stings the most is that she didn't stop there. She didn't offer a reason, didn't say, "Not right now," or "Let's talk later," or "Maybe things will be different." She just repeated it. Just "Don't come, Dad, please. Please." Like she was the one doing me a favor. Like she had to soften the blow of cutting me out the biggest day of her life. And I would have respected her choice, painful as it was, if everything ended there, if it was just me being asked to stay away. But the world has a cruel way of twisting the knife exactly when it knows you can't take another cut. Because on the wedding day, yes, I went quietly hidden, sitting in the very back where no one would notice me, I heard the priest ask, "Who gives this bride away?" That question is sacred. A father waits his whole life for that moment. Even if he's not perfect. Even if life messed up the edges of the relationship. That moment is a father's last gift to his daughter before she starts a life of her own. But instead of silence, instead of my daughter glancing back with hesitation, instead of her calling my name or even whispering it under her breath, someone else stepped forward. Someone who shouldn't have been in that position. Someone who shouldn't have even been in that church. Someone who had no right, absolutely no right, to take a role that belonged to me. And that single moment cracked open everything I thought I knew. It revealed secrets I had no idea existed, lies that stretched back years, manipulations so deep it poisoned the very bond between me and my daughter. But before I can tell you how everything spiraled, Before I explain why that man stepping forward was the spark that ignited every truth that had been buried, before I reveal how my revenge didn't come from anger, but from a heartbreak that pushed me to uncover every hidden story that led us to that church, I need to take you back. Back to where the cracks in my family first formed. Back to the early signs I ignored. Back to the slow unraveling of a life I thought was steady, simple, and safe. Long before my daughter ever said, "Dad, don't come to the wedding." This story didn't begin at that altar. It didn't begin with a priest's question. It didn't begin with the man who stepped forward in my place. It began much earlier, in quiet moments, subtle shifts, unspoken resentments, and hidden betrayals I never saw coming. And if you want to understand why that moment shattered me, you need to hear how the ground beneath my family had been cracking long before it finally broke. Let me take you there, to the beginning, to where everything changed. I wasn't born with much, and that's putting it kindly. My childhood wasn't the kind that fills photo albums. It wasn't soft or gentle or steady. It was rough, loud, unpredictable, the kind of upbringing that teaches you to grow up fast or get swallowed whole. I learned early on that if I wanted something, anything, I'd have to work for it with my own two hands. No one was going to hand me a damn thing. So when I turned 18, I walked onto a construction site with nothing but a pair of worn-out boots and a stubborn determination to make a life better than the one I came from. And let me tell you, Arizona doesn't give you any favors. The sun here doesn't shine, it scorches. It burns you, drains you, melts you from the inside out. I spent years hauling wood, mixing concrete, climbing steel frames that shook under my feet while sweat rolled into my eyes thick as salt water. I worked the jobs nobody wanted, roofing in July, digging trenches in August, tearing down old buildings full of dust that clung to your lungs. But I kept going, day after day, year after year, because I knew what I was building wasn't just houses and offices and sidewalks. I was building a future. I didn't care about fancy things. I didn't dream of sports cars or vacations or some mansion in the hills. What I wanted, more than anything, was a home that felt safe. A place where no one yelled, no one slammed doors, no one slept with fear in their chest. A place where love didn't depend on luck. A place where I wasn't walking on eggshells like I had as a kid. And somehow, I found that place in Samantha. God, when I first met her, she felt like fresh air after years of breathing dust. She was warm, gentle, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who could calm you just by placing her hand on your arm. She worked at a small real estate office back then, always dressed neat, always smelling faintly of vanilla and something floral. I remember the first time she laughed at something stupid. I said, really laughed, the kind where she covered her mouth and blushed, and I swear, it hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken in my life. We married young, but it never felt rushed. It felt right, and when our daughter Emily came along, it was like life itself paused just to let me appreciate the moment. I'd come home after 10 hours of grinding work, covered in dust and grime, and the second I stepped through that door and saw Samantha rocking Emily in her arms, everything felt worth it. The pain, the heat, the exhaustion, all of it disappeared. Emily was Daddy's girl from the start. She'd press her tiny palm against my stubble and giggle, tug at my shirt until I lifted her, fall asleep on my chest, with her little breaths warming my skin. I promised myself and her that I'd give her the home I never had, and for a long time, I kept that promise. But like they say, time has a way of wearing down even the strongest foundations if you're not paying attention. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't start with a fight or a moment or some big dramatic scene. It started quietly, subtly, almost unnoticeably, like a shift in the wind you can't quite describe. Around my 40th birthday, a milestone that felt more like a reminder of everything I'd lost and gained, I noticed a difference in Samantha, a distance, a fading warmth, like a light bulb beginning to flicker. She stopped waiting up for me. Before, even if she was tired, she'd sit on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, watching TV until I came home. Then she'd smile, that soft smile that told me she cared. But slowly, she traded that for going to bed early, closing the door, leaving only the hallway light on. She stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped asking how my day was, stopped touching me in those small ways, a hand on the back, a brush of fingers, a kiss on the cheek, that married couples depend on more than they realize. Instead, she'd sit at the kitchen table scrolling her phone, staring at the screen like it was her lifeline, her escape hatch, her secret world. Her face took on that expression I've seen far too many people wear, a blank, faraway look, like she was somewhere else entirely, somewhere I wasn't invited. I told myself it was stress, work, exhaustion, maybe even early signs of depression. But then he appeared. Derek Clayton. Even saying his name now feels like sand scraping my tongue. He wasn't the kind of guy you could easily miss. He had that polished look, the kind that screams, I care more about my reflection than anything else. Always ironing his shirts to perfection. Always wearing cologne too strong for an office. Always slicking his hair back like he was trying to look younger, cooler, more charming than he really was. He worked in the same real estate office as Samantha, and at first, I didn't think anything of him. I mean, co-workers talk, work friends exist. I'm not the jealous type, never have been. When you're married, you give trust freely, because holding it hostage is no way to live. But little things started piling up. His name showing up in conversations more often. Samantha laughing at jokes on her phone she wouldn't share. Sudden late nights at the office. Makeup she never wore before. Perfume I didn't recognize. One afternoon, the moment burned into my memory like a scar. I came home early from a job. The sky was cloudy, rare for Arizona, and the breeze carried dust across the road. I remember thinking I'd surprise Samantha with takeout, maybe catch a movie together that night if Emily didn't need help with homework. Just a simple plan, something normal, something ours. But when I turned onto our street, I saw a silver sedan parked in my driveway. I didn't recognize it at first. But when I walked closer, my stomach dropped. It was Derek's car. My gut tightened so hard I had to pause before opening the front door. I didn't want to assume anything. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But sometimes, your instincts scream louder than your logic. Walking into my own home felt like stepping into someone else's life. There they were, sitting at the dining table. Too close, too comfortable. Papers spread out like props, as if they were rehearsing some flimsy excuse they both memorized. Samantha's voice was high, shaky, overly cheerful, the kind of tone people use when they're trying to act natural but failing miserably. Derek smiled at me, that fake, slimy smile that made my skin crawl. I said nothing. Not because I didn't feel something, trust me, I felt something burning deep inside, but because I didn't want to explode without facts. I didn't want to accuse without proof. I didn't want to believe what I already sensed. So I stayed quiet. Too quiet. And I regret that silence every damn day. Because that moment, that single moment, was the beginning of the slow unraveling of the life I had spent decades building. The beginning of cracks forming in places I thought were solid. The beginning of lies seeping through the foundation of my family like water rotting wood from the inside out. If I had confronted them then, who knows? Maybe the story would have ended differently. Maybe I could have saved something. Maybe I could have stopped the collapse. But I didn't say a word. And looking back, that silence was the biggest mistake I ever made. When I think back on those years, it's almost strange how quiet the destruction was. You expect the end of a marriage to sound loud, doors slamming, shouting, breaking plates, something dramatic like in the movies. But in real life, the real kind of betrayal, it slips in like a draft under a door. You don't notice it until the whole house feels cold. At first, Samantha's distance felt temporary. Like maybe she was stressed from work or tired or hormonal or just going through something she couldn't explain yet. I wanted to give her space because that's what husbands do. They try to understand, they try to help, but understanding only works when the other person wants to be understood. Samantha didn't. She wanted freedom, Not from chores, not from stress, not from life, but from me. She started saying she was staying late at the real estate office. Busy season, she said. Tons of listings, she claimed. Even though I'd lived in that same Arizona suburb for 20 years and knew damn well that nobody bought houses in the middle of a brutal summer unless their air conditioning quit on them or they were running from something. Still, I tried believing her, because believing is easier than accepting what your gut already knows. Soon after came the little things, the subtle shifts only a husband of many years can notice. She started turning her phone screen downward when I walked into a room, started clutching it like she expected it to explode if someone else touched it. Notifications stopped being noises, they became vibrations, silent, secretive. Her laugh changed too. I swear to you, there's a difference between a normal laugh and the kind a woman makes when she's falling for someone new. That sharp little breath that slips out before she even realizes she's smiling. And I heard that sound way too often. But the part that made it worse, Emily saw it all. My daughter was 15. That age when kids are half-grown, half-child trying to figure out their place in the world. A fragile time, a dangerous one. I'd find her sitting in her room with her headphones on but no music playing, just staring at her wall like she was trying to decode everything that was happening around her. She didn't know who to trust. She didn't know what was real. One night she even asked me, in that tiny scared voice, "Dad, are you and Mom gonna be okay?" And I lied. I lied to protect her. Yeah, kiddo, we're just going through a rough patch. But the truth was, we were sinking, and Samantha wasn't grabbing my hand anymore, she was holding someone else. The night everything cracked open wasn't even dramatic. It wasn't stormy. It wasn't loud. It was almost mundane, if you can imagine that. I was fixing a leak under the kitchen sink, on my knees, water dripping down my forearm, pipe wrench in hand, when I heard it. A soft laugh. A whisper. A tone I knew too well. It came from the laundry room. At first I thought she was on speakerphone with her sister or a friend, but something was off. The way she lowered her voice, the way her footsteps shifted, the way the silence changed afterward, like the house itself was holding its breath. I wiped my hands, walked over, and stepped into the doorway. Samantha stood there with her phone pressed to her ear, her back straight, her face pale. Her eyes widened when she saw me, not with fear of hurting me, not with regret, but with irritation, like I had interrupted something that didn't concern me. She didn't hang up fast enough. Didn't hide the flustered smile. Didn't bother with the classic excuses. We just stared at each other. And that's when she said it, the line that still rings in my head like a dull hammer. "Richard, I haven't been happy for a long time." For a moment I just stood there like someone had cut the strings holding me up. A part of me wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to ask her why she never said anything, why she never gave us a chance. But another part of me, a deeper, older part, knew it was pointless. When someone decides they're done loving you, you can't force them back. You can't beg them. You can't reason with them. It's like trying to hold on to smoke. She packed a bag 2 days later. Left the house with the same calmness someone uses when leaving a hotel room they no longer need. And a week after the divorce papers were signed, she moved into an apartment on the other side of town. With him, Derek Clayton. Mr. Polished Real Estate Salesman. Mr. Let me help you with that paperwork. Mr. O, your husband must be exhausted from work. The vulture that circled my marriage long before I knew it was dying. But even after the betrayal, even after losing the woman, I thought I'd build my old age with. The worst part wasn't starting over at 40 plus. It was watching my daughter slip away from me. Samantha, God help me, was good at twisting things. She always had a talent for flipping the story to make herself look like the victim. And she didn't waste time using that talent on Emily. Every weekend visit, every phone call between them, every tiny crack in my daughter's teenage heart, Samantha filled it with poison. Your dad was never around. He chose work over us. He pushed me away. He made me unhappy. Lie after lie after lie. I'd pick Emily up for dinner, and she'd barely talk. I'd ask her what was wrong, and she'd shrug. I'd tell her I loved her, and she'd nod but not look at me. It was like losing her 1 inch at a time. By the time she turned 18, she was practically a stranger living under my roof. And the older she got, the more she saw me through the lens her mother and Derek handed her, the man who ruined their family, the man who made her childhood unstable, the man not worth forgiving. And that poison, it didn't wear off. Not even as she became an adult. Not even as she moved out. Not even as she met the man she planned to marry. The poison stayed until the day she told me, straight to my face, "Dad, don't come to the wedding." But that wasn't the final betrayal. Because at that altar, in front of God and everyone she loved, someone else stepped forward to give my daughter away. And that man wasn't me. If anyone had told me, back when Emily used to fall asleep on my chest after watching Saturday cartoons, that one day she'd treat me like a stranger, I would have laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from pure disbelief, because back then there was no world where my little girl would ever grow distant from me. But life has a way of turning the unthinkable into the unavoidable. After the divorce, the shift didn't happen overnight. That's the cruel part. It wasn't like one day she hugged me and the next day she hated me. No, it was gradual, slow, the kind of slow that hurts because you can feel it, but you can't stop it. Like watching the sun set too early, little by little, until one day you realize you're standing in the dark and you didn't even see it happen. In the beginning, Emily still stayed with me on weekends. My house wasn't fancy, just an old one-story place with creaky floors and a stubborn doorknob that squeaked like a mouse every time someone opened it. But it was home. It smelled like sawdust from leftover construction projects and the lemon soap I always used. It was simple, it was mine, and it was hers. But when she came over after the separation, she wasn't really there. She'd sit on the couch staring at her phone, thumbs moving fast, eyes glued to her screen like she was waiting for something more important than anything I could say. I'd cook her dinner, her favorite, those pan-fried chicken tenders she used to devour, but she'd pick at her plate, barely noticing. "School going okay?" I ask, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," she'd mumble. "How's your math class?" "Fine." "You need help with anything?" "No." Every answer got shorter, like she was checking off a chore, like talking to me was just another box to mark before she could get back to whatever was happening on that damn phone. But deep down, I knew exactly who she was messaging. Samantha. And Derek. Her mother feeding her one narrative, and that man feeding her another. I tried ignoring it. Tried telling myself she was just being a teenager. Tried convincing myself she'd grow out of it. But when your kid looks at you like you're the cause of all their problems, it's hard to pretend everything is normal. Sometimes I'd walk past her bedroom door and see her wiping her eyes. When I knocked and asked what was wrong, she'd say, "Nothing." But her phone would buzz right after, and she'd turn it face down again. It was like watching someone build a wall brick by brick, and every lie Samantha told her was another brick. Every smug smile Derek tossed my way at school events was another. Every moment Emily spent in their world, instead of mine, added another layer. I'd take her to her favorite burger joint downtown, the one with greasy fries and walls covered in vintage license plates. We used to go there all the time when she was little. She'd laugh, she'd talk my ear off, she'd dip fries in her milkshake like some wild kid who didn't care what anyone thought. But now I'd sit across from her while she scrolled her phone, barely taking a bite. "You okay?" I'd ask. "Yeah." "Something on your mind?" "No." "Want to talk about it?" "It's fine, Dad." But it wasn't fine, it was far from fine. And as the years went by, that distance only widened. I kept showing up for her. Every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every art showcase, every choir performance. Even though she barely acknowledged me. I'd sit in the crowd, clapping harder than anyone else, hopping maybe, Just maybe she'd look out and see me, remember me, feel something. But she'd always rush off to her mother and Derek afterward. And I'd go home alone. By the time she hit 18, things weren't just awkward, they were cold. She moved out shortly after high school, choosing to live with her mother instead of sticking around with me. I tried not to take it personally, but how could I not? It felt like losing her in slow motion. The calls stopped first. Then the texts. Then the holidays. I remember one Father's Day, I cleared my schedule, grilled steaks, even bought a new folding chair for us to sit outside and talk like we used to. I waited, and waited, and waited. She never showed. Not a call. Not even a message. I sat on that old porch, listening to crickets and the hum of the neighbor's AC unit, staring at the untouched plate across from me. And for the first time since the divorce, I truly let myself feel the weight of everything I'd lost. Not the marriage. That was gone long before. But my daughter. My baby girl. The kid who used to grip my finger with her entire hand. The teenager who used to fall asleep in the passenger seat after long drives. The little girl who once told me I was her hero. Gone. And the worst part. Everyone in town talked. It's a small place. You can't sneeze without 3 people knowing about it. And through whispered conversations and second-hand comments, I kept hearing the same thing. Derek's really stepped up. He's like a second father to her. She's so close with him. Each comment hit like a punch, not because Derek deserved to be called a father figure, but because I knew damn well he enjoyed every second of replacing me. He didn't just steal my wife. He didn't just interfere with my marriage. He stole my daughter's love. Piece by piece. Until there was nothing left for me. Those years of silence, those years of distance, they didn't just hurt, they hollowed me out. They left me questioning everything, my worth, my role, my mistakes, my failures. But I never expected things to get worse. Never thought I'd face a deeper betrayal. Never imagined Emily would one day say the words that shattered whatever hope I had left. Dad, don't come to the wedding. And I sure as hell didn't expect what would happen at that wedding. Because the man who stepped forward when the priest asked, "Who gives this bride away?" was the same man who destroyed my family. Fast forward nearly a decade, the divorce behind me. The heartbreak settled like old dust on furniture you're too tired to clean. I'd gotten used to the quiet, too used maybe. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was the kind that feels like you're living in a house with its windows nailed shut. But I'd learned to live with it. 52 years old, a modest home outside Phoenix, just me, my tools, and whatever leftovers I heated up at night. I didn't expect anything to change. Not after all that time. Not after years of missed birthdays, ignored calls, and holidays spent staring at a folded, untouched napkin across an empty table. But one evening, it must have been a Tuesday, quiet and warm, the sky that kind of hazy orange Arizona always likes to paint, I heard a knock at my front door. It wasn't a delivery. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't someone selling solar panels. When I opened it, there she was. My daughter, Emily. She looked older, more grown than the last time I'd really looked at her. Her hair was styled differently, her makeup lighter, her clothing more mature. She looked like a woman, elegant, composed, but her eyes carried years of exhaustion, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite name. Regret, guilt, fear. For a moment, a wild, reckless moment, my heart dared to hope. Maybe she was here to reconnect. Maybe she was ready to talk. Maybe she realized I wasn't the monster she'd been taught to see. Maybe the distance finally cracked, and she remembered the father who once carried her on his shoulders, who cheered for her at every event, who loved her more than anything. But the hope didn't last. Her expression stayed stiff, her hands gripping each other in front of her like she was bracing for impact. She didn't step inside, didn't ask how I'd been, didn't smile. "Dad, I'm getting married." The words hit me in two waves, joy first, the kind that catches you off guard. My daughter, getting married. A milestone I always pictured being a part of. I imagined walking her down the aisle, placing her hand in someone else's, whispering that I was proud of her. I imagined crying, because even a tough old construction guy cries when his baby girl becomes a bride. A small smile crept onto my face, a fragile one, hopeful, vulnerable. But then she added, quickly, sharply, almost like ripping off a bandage, "And I don't want you to come." I felt it physically. Not metaphorically, physically. Like someone drove a fist right into the center of my stomach and twisted. My mouth fell open. My smile disappeared. And the world around me felt unreal, like the air went thin and the walls of my home leaned in. "What?" I whispered. She avoided my eyes, looked past my shoulder at the wall behind me, anywhere except at the man she was hurting. "It'll just be easier this way," she said quietly. "I don't want drama." Drama? Me? Drama? After years of being the one who stayed steady, after being the one who never raised his voice, after being the one trying to keep the peace long before anyone else even cared to. I tried to breathe, tried to form words. "Emily, wife." She swallowed hard. I could see the muscle in her jaw tense. Her fingers trembled. There was shame there, deep shame, but also something else. "Fear. I just don't want there to be tension," she said. "It's complicated." Complicated. Everything was complicated when it came to her mother. Everything was complicated when it came to Derek. I stepped back a little, giving her space, trying to process the blow she'd just delivered. "I'm your father," I finally managed. "How could I cause drama at your wedding? I just want to be there for you." Her eyes flickered, just a flicker, of the girl she once was. The girl who used to grip my hand crossing the street. The girl who used to tell me about her dreams, her fears, her day at school. But the flicker died quickly. "Dad, please," she whispered, "don't make this harder." That hurt more than the initial blow. It was like she'd built a wall so tall I couldn't even recognize the outline of the child I raised. And then she told me his name. The name that explained everything. His name is Evan Clayton. Clayton. That name slammed into me like a freight train. My mind raced. Clayton. 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 Of all the men in Arizona. Of all the relationships she could have had. Of every possible scenario fate could have thrown at me. My daughter was as marrying his son. Derek Clayton's son. My ex-wife's new husband. The man who stole my marriage. The man who replaced me in my own daughter's life. The man who poisoned her against me. And now his son was becoming part of my bloodline. Emily had gone quiet, watching my reaction carefully. She didn't need to explain anymore. The moment she said that last name, everything fell into place. The shame in her eyes. The stiffness in her voice. The reason she didn't want me at the wedding. The reason she didn't want drama. Because she knew how it would look. The father who got pushed out of his own family tree. Standing in the same room as the man who took everything from him. And the man's son marrying his daughter. She didn't want conflict. She didn't want truth. She didn't want the fragile reality she built with Derek's family to crack open and expose the lies underneath. And me, I wasn't just being excluded. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being replaced. Entirely. Permanently. Deliberately. She took a small step back, still not meeting my eyes, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." But she was. Not fully. She was sorry for the discomfort, the awkwardness, and not for choosing them over me. Then she turned and walked down my driveway, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, her figure getting smaller and smaller until she reached her car. She didn't turn around. She didn't wave. She didn't look back at her father standing alone in the doorway. I watched her drive away, watched the taillights disappear, watched the silence return. But that night, sitting alone on my couch, the reality sinking in, something in me shifted. For the first time in years, the hurt turned into something else. Not rage, not bitterness, but clarity. If they wanted me gone from that wedding, if they thought they could rewrite the past and erase me from her life, if they thought betrayal was something I would just swallow quietly, they were about to learn something they never saw coming. Because some fathers disappear when they're pushed out, but others, they show up. I told myself I'd respect her wishes. I repeated it over and over like some tired mantra. She's an adult now, Richard. Let her make her choices. She said no, don't push it. She has her life, let her live it. But the night before the wedding, God, I didn't sleep a single second. Not even close. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its slow, crooked wobble. Every rotation felt like it was scraping against my heart. My mind wouldn't quiet down. It pulled me back through every moment of fatherhood, each one hitting me harder than the last. I remembered holding her when she was barely 7 pounds, so tiny she could fit between my elbow and my chest. I remembered her first steps, her wild giggle when she realized she could run. The way she'd run into my arms every time I came home from work, boots still dusty, and she'd cling to my neck like she never wanted me to leave again. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike in the scorching Arizona sun, how she hit a bump, scraped her knee, and cried until I picked her up, and suddenly the pain didn't matter because I was there. I remembered carrying her when she fell asleep in the car, her head heavy on my shoulder. And now she didn't want me at her wedding. My chest felt tight enough to crack. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel natural. Something inside me kept saying, you need to be there. Not to interfere, not to ruin her day, but because I was still her father, and I couldn't let the moment pass without being present in some way, even if she never knew. So I made a decision sometime around 4 a.m., when the first hint of dawn crept across my window. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to walk up front. I wasn't even going to speak to her. I would just sit quietly in the back. A shadow. A ghost. A father who refused to let go, not out of stubbornness, but out of love. That morning I dressed in the nicest suit I owned, older, slightly wrinkled at the cuffs, but clean. I combed my hair, shaved, took a deep breath, and drove to the little church she'd chosen. It sat tucked between 2 dusty oak trees, white steeples stretching toward a sky too bright for how heavy my heart felt. Cars lined the small gravel lot, nice ones too, shiny, polished, belonging to a crowd of people who likely had no idea who I was. I waited in my truck for several minutes before gathering the courage to step out. With each step toward the door, I felt like I was walking into an alternate life, a life where I should have been front and center, giving my daughter away with pride, not skulking around like a stranger hopping not to be noticed. Inside, the church was breathtaking in the simplest way. Soft, warm lights hung overhead. White roses decorated every pew. The wooden benches polished until they gleamed. It felt intimate, sacred, a kind of place meant for memories that last generations. I slid into the very back corner, behind a wide column and partially hidden by a tall floral arrangement. From where I sat, no one could see me unless they were really looking. The music began soft and slow. People stood, heads turned. Phones came out. Then she appeared at the entrance. Emily, my baby girl. She looked God, she looked stunning. Not the little girl I used to tuck in at night, not the teenager I tried to understand, but a full-grown woman, elegant, poised, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Her dress flowed behind her like a soft cloud, her hair pinned with tiny pearls that glimmered under the lights. My chest tightened, my eyes strung, and for a moment, just a brief, fragile moment, I felt an overwhelming swell of pride and grief. I felt both so sharply, it was almost unbearable. She walked slowly down the aisle, holding her bouquet tightly, her face composed but tense. I noticed the way she kept glancing around, a flicker of nerves, like something was pulling at her from inside. Then the ceremony began. I tried to stay invisible, tried to quiet my breathing, tried to push down every emotion so it wouldn't swallow me whole. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. The priest looked at Emily and her fiancé, Evan, and spoke clearly. "Who gives this bride away?" Silence fell across the church. Everyone looked toward the front row. And then it happened. Derek stood up and he straightened his expensive suit like he was preparing for a photo shoot. Placed a hand, my hand's rightful place, on the small of Emily's back. Smiled confidently. And stepped forward like he owned the moment. I stopped breathing. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. My entire body went numb. That man, the man who destroyed my marriage, manipulated my daughter, shoved me out of her life, was stepping into my place, into my role, into the moment that belonged to me and me alone. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't show even a flicker of guilt. He wore that same smug, polished expression I'd seen for years, an expression that said, "Look what I took from you." But before he could speak, the entire room gasped. Not one person. Not two. The whole church. Because Emily, my daughter, took a sharp step away from Derek. She pulled back from his touch like it burned her. Her shoulders rose with a shaky breath. Her bouquet trembled in her hands. Her face tightened, not with joy, not with nerves, but with something far deeper. Something I hadn't seen in years. Something I thought she'd forgotten how to feel toward me. Her eyes wide, conflicted, shining under the soft lights, filled with recognition. With clarity. With truth trying to claw its way to the surface, after being buried for nearly a decade. She turned her head slightly, looking toward the back of the church. Toward me. She didn't know I was there. But somehow, she felt it. Felt the weight of what she was about to do. Felt the lie standing beside her. Felt the truth she'd been avoiding for years. And when her gaze finally found me, half hidden behind flowers, dressed in an old suit, sitting alone like a ghost. Her lips parted. Her eyes widened. Her entire world stopped. And so did mine. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. It felt like the entire church, from the ancient wooden rafters to the polished marble floor, was holding itself completely still, like time itself had paused to watch what was about to unfold. Emily didn't speak immediately. She just stood there in her wedding dress, her chest rising and falling with short, uneven breaths, staring at the priest as though his simple question, "Who gives this bride away?" had crushed the last wall she'd been holding up inside her. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I thought she might faint. She looked so torn, so hollowed out, so full of something unbearable that she didn't know how to hold anymore. The priest took half a step toward her, concerned, but she gently shook her head. Then, in the softest, most fragile voice I've ever heard from her, she whispered, "None of this feels right." Those 5 words hit the room like a silent bomb. You could feel the panic ripple through the guests, like an invisible shockwave. The groom, Evan, blinked at her in confusion, his eyebrows knitting together as he reached toward her shoulder. He was scared, and honestly, who wouldn't be? His bride was unraveling right in front of him, and he had no idea why. But Derek didn't look confused. He looked furious. His jaw clenched so tightly the muscle twitched. His nostrils flared. His posture stiffened like he was preparing for a public relations crisis. not an emotional moment for the daughter he had claimed to love like his own. And Samantha, my ex-wife, she didn't look angry or confused. She looked terrified. Pure fear, eyes wide, breath caught, hands shaking as she reached for Derek's arm, gripping it like she already knew exactly what was coming. Emily's fingers loosened, and her bouquet slipped from her hands. It hit the floor with a soft thud, scattering a few white rose petals across the aisle. The sound was so small, so delicate, yet somehow it echoed louder than anything else. People started murmuring. Is she okay? Should someone help her? Is she having a panic attack? What's going on? A few guests stood halfway, unsure whether to rush to her or stay put. But then Emily lifted her head, slowly, deliberately, and turned her gaze toward Derek. And her expression changed. She didn't look confused anymore. She didn't look lost. She didn't look afraid. She looked angry, heartbroken, awake. Her voice came out louder, clearer, trembling with a rawness that made every hair on my arms stand up. Stop, just stop pretending. The entire church froze. Every whisper died instantly. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Derek stared at her, eyebrows pulled together, trying to maintain his picture-perfect father figure act, but Emily didn't give him a second to speak. She continued, her voice cracking but stronger with every word. I know what you did. I know what you told me about my dad. Everything you said was a lie. Derek's face went pale in an instant. Not embarrassed pale, no, this was fear. Real, unfiltered fear. Samantha gasped so sharply, it cut through the silence like a knife. She clutched Derek's arm tighter, as if willing him not to say anything, not to lose control. People in the first few pews leaned forward, eyes wide, as if watching a courtroom drama unfold live at the altar. Emily lifted her trembling hand and pointed directly at Derek. Her fingertips shook violently, but her voice didn't waver anymore. You made me hate my father, she said. You told me he abandoned us. You told me he didn't care. You told me he never tried. And I believed you. I believed every word. Her voice cracked on that last part, and she blinked hard, fighting tears. But your emails, your messages, she swallowed, shaking her head, as if reliving the moment she discovered them. Your own words betrayed you. The screenshots, the timelines, the conversations you hid, everything you did. She took a shaky breath. You manipulated Mom into leaving him. There. Silence. Not a single person moved. Not a single cough. Not a single shuffle of feet. Just silence. You pushed her, Emily's voice rose, trembling with heartbreak and rage. You pressured her, you poisoned her mind. You convinced her that my dad wasn't good enough, that he was holding her back, that she deserved someone better, someone like you. Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His throat bobbed as he swallowed, struggling to hold onto the persona he'd worn for so many years. Emily didn't let him speak. You ruined my family, she said, on purpose. You didn't just pursue Mom. You didn't just fall for someone who was married. You engineered it. You made it happen. You calculated it. You tore apart their marriage and then acted like you were the hero who rescued her. Her voice echoed in the silent church, each word heavy enough to crack the stained glass windows. Guests stared at Derek like they were seeing him for the very first time. Without the charm, without the money, without the polished smile he always wore like armor. And then Emily said the words that took the broken pieces of my heart and pieced them back together. You didn't just destroy their marriage, she whispered. You used me as a weapon. Her face crumpled slightly, and tears filled her eyes. You made me think my dad didn't love me. You made me think he never fought for me. You made me believe he didn't want me, when the truth is, he was the only one who ever tried. Gasps spread through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another person covered her mouth with both hands. Samantha stood motionless as Emily spoke, every word hitting her like a hammer. Guilt washed over her face, guilt so deep it seemed to age her 10 years in a minute. As Emily stood there, dress shimmering, tears streaming, heart laid bare in front of a room full of strangers, it was clear that the truth she had uncovered wasn't just scandalous. It wasn't just dramatic. It was devastating, life-changing, family-destroying. And now, finally, it was no longer hidden. The secret was out. The wedding was no longer a wedding. It was a reckoning. Emily didn't waste a second after those final words left her mouth. The weight of the truth, years of manipulation, lies, emotional poison, came crashing down on her, and she did the only thing a wounded heart knows how to do when the truth finally becomes too heavy to hold. She ran. Her dress brushed against the pews, snagging on one of the wooden corners as she pushed through the aisle, the train dragging behind her like a ghost of the life she'd almost stepped into. Guests whispered, gasped, turned their heads to follow her, but she didn't look at them. She didn't look at her mother. She didn't look at Derek or Evan or the priest who stood frozen mid-sentence. She just ran, hands shaking, breath uneven, tears streaming down her face, like every suppressed emotion from the last decade had finally found its escape route. And I stayed where I was, hidden behind the column, invisible, unwanted, exactly how she had been conditioned to see me all those years. My instinct, my father's instinct, wanted to run after her, to hold her, to tell her it was okay, that none of this was her fault, that she didn't need to carry the guilt, but I stayed still. I didn't want to make anything worse. I didn't want to walk into a moment that wasn't mine to take, not after everything she'd believed about me, not after everything she'd been told. So I watched her from the shadows. I watched the girl I raised, the girl who used to hold my hand so tightly crossing the street, the girl who'd fall asleep on my shoulder during movie nights, the girl whose tiny fingers used to wrap around one of mine, run away from a truth that had been kept from her for almost half her life. She reached the church doors, pushed them open. A burst of sunlight spilled inside, painting her silhouette in this soft, golden glow that made her look like she was stepping out of darkness for the first time. And then, right before she disappeared, she stopped. Her shoulders lifted as she took a deep, shaky breath, and then she slowly turned her head back toward the inside of the church. Her eyes scanned the room, frantic, searching, desperate. Not for Derek, not for her mother, not for her almost husband, for me. And then, her eyes found mine. It was just a second. A heartbeat. One tiny moment in a lifetime full of broken ones. But it felt like the world cracked open. Her breath hitched so sharply I could hear it from across the room. She lifted her hand to her mouth, covering it like she'd been struck with the realization that I had seen everything, that I had heard everything, that I had been there for the moment she tore her life apart to finally understand the truth. Her knees wobbled. Her shoulders shook. Her entire body collapsed inward, like she'd been holding up a building with her bare hands, and suddenly lost the strength. And then, before I could even think about moving, she was already running. Down the aisle, toward the back of the church, toward me. Her wedding dress fluttered behind her in a white rush, the fabric catching the light, catching the air, catching every scar, visible and invisible, left behind by the years apart. "Dad," she choked out as she got closer, her voice breaking in the middle, splintering into pieces. She didn't slow down, didn't hesitate, didn't question whether I would open my arms. She just collided into me, hard, like she'd been running back to a home she didn't know she'd been missing until that very moment. Her arms wrapped around me instantly, desperately, her fingers clutching the back of my shirt, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. She buried her face in my chest, sobbing deep, broken sobs that shook her entire body. Sobs that sounded like apologies and pain and years of regret spilling out all at once. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she cried, her voice muffled against me. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what he did. I didn't know what he made me believe. I didn't know, Dad, I'm sorry." Her words kept coming in pieces, tumbling over each other, tangled with her tears. And I held her. God, I held her like I'd been waiting 10 years for this exact moment, for the feeling of her arms around me again, for the sound of her voice saying my name without distance in it, for the weight of her head against my chest, like when she was a little girl. My eyes burned. My throat tightened. My heart cracked and mended at the same time. I pressed my hand gently to the back of her head, the way I used to when she'd cry after scraping her knee or having a bad dream. Except this time she was older. This time the pain ran deeper. This time the wounds weren't from childhood. They were from betrayal, lies, manipulation, and years of believing she didn't belong to me anymore. "It's okay," I whispered, though my voice shook. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. I'm right here. I never left. I never stopped loving you." And hearing those words, it broke her all over again. Her sobs grew louder, rawer, like she'd been holding them in for years, and finally had permission to let them out. Guests stood up from their seats, watching, stunned, speechless. Samantha stood frozen near the altar, hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Derek stared like the world he built with manipulation and lies had finally collapsed. Evan looked lost, conflicted, helpless. But none of that mattered. Not the guests, not the whispers, not the shock, not the ruined wedding. In that moment, it was just me and Emily. Just a father and a daughter finding each other again after nearly a decade of being ripped apart. The kind of reunion you don't plan for. The kind that doesn't happen gently. The kind that doesn't happen quietly. This was the kind that happens like a storm breaking open after years of drought. For the first time in almost 10 years, I had my daughter back. People have this Hollywood idea of revenge, this big explosion, this dramatic showdown, this moment where you finally scream, "I told you so," and walk away in slow motion like some action hero. But real life, real betrayal, real pain doesn't work like that. Not for a man like me. Not for someone who spent years swallowing the ache of losing a daughter, years blaming himself, years convincing himself that maybe he deserved the silence. Revenge wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something I chased. It wasn't even something I wanted. What I wanted, what I prayed for, was my daughter back. But the thing about truth, it has teeth. And once it bites, it doesn't let go. In the days after the wedding, the truth spread faster than gossip in a small Arizona town, which, trust me, is saying something. People talk. People share screenshots. People whisper in grocery lines and at barber shops and over backyard fences. And when the truth is ugly, they whisper louder. Those emails Emily found, those messages Derek sent to Samantha years ago, the ones where he manipulated her into believing I didn't love her, didn't appreciate her, didn't value her, they didn't stay hidden. Emily didn't intend to start a wildfire, but she was angry, heartbroken, betrayed, and desperate for answers. When she showed those messages to her mother, Samantha didn't take it quietly. She marched straight back into that house she shared with Derek, stormed in like a woman who just discovered she'd been living in a beautifully decorated prison, and demanded the truth. And when Derek tried that charm of his, that snake oil salesman's smile, that smooth-talking, you're overreacting tone he'd perfected over the years, it didn't work. Not this time. Not on a woman who finally realized she'd been played like a fiddle. Samantha packed her bags the same night. She told him she could forgive cheating. She could forgive falling out of love. But she couldn't forgive being manipulated. She couldn't forgive letting a man use her insecurities against her. She couldn't forgive abandoning a good husband, a decent man, because a snake whispered poison into her ears. Emily stayed with me for a few nights after the wedding fallout. She slept in her old room, the one that still had faint outlines on the wall where posters used to hang. She walked around the house touching things, old family photos, the kitchen counter where she used to do her homework, the porch swing she and I built together, like she was rediscovering a childhood she'd nearly erased from her memory. Meanwhile, the Clayton family name, this spotless, polished, artificially perfect brand Derek, built like a castle made of glass, was cracking. It started with whispers, then quiet conversations, then sudden cancellations. 3 business partners pulled out of a major development deal within 48 hours. A local blog published an anonymous letter outlining Derek's manipulation tactics, not just with his family, but with clients. Someone who used to work under him commented about his unethical behavior. And once one person speaks up, others feel brave enough to add their stories. It was like dominoes falling, one after another after another's. Derek tried damage control. He tried calling people. He tried spinning the narrative. He tried blaming everyone but himself. But you can't gaslight an entire town. You can't manipulate every eye watching you crumble. And you sure as hell can't escape the truth when it finally has a microphone. By the 3rd day, Evan, the son Derek had molded, groomed, and raised under a fog of half-truths, showed up at my house. I didn't know whether to brace myself or offer him a chair, but when he stepped inside, he looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in a week. He apologized. For the wedding. For the deception. For believing in his father's version of events. He told me he couldn't marry Emily, not because he didn't love her, but because he couldn't build a future on the ashes of what his father had done. He said he needed to unlearn everything Derek had taught him. And honestly, I didn't blame him. The poor kid had been raised on poison too. Emily cried when Evan left, not because of heartbreak, but because it felt like another chapter closing, a chapter built on lies and manipulation. She wasn't angry, she understood, but it still hurt watching something innocent collapse under the weight of sins that weren't even hers. As for Derek, his real estate license was suspended within a month after formal complaints rolled in. Clients he'd lied to, deals he'd manipulated, contracts he'd twisted for personal gain, and once investigators dug deeper, they found even more. Financial dishonesty, falsified property values, pressure tactics on clients who trusted him. Everything he built, every smug smile, every polished suit, every ego-driven step he took, collapsed under the weight of truth he'd buried for too long. He had destroyed me once, but in the end, he destroyed himself. And the irony, I didn't lift a finger. I didn't plot. I didn't scheme. I didn't seek revenge. I just stood still while the truth burned through his life like a slow-moving wildfire. The same truth he spent years hiding. People asked me later if I felt satisfied watching him lose everything. If it felt good seeing the man who tore my family apart finally choke on his own lies. But here's the honest truth. The sweetest revenge wasn't seeing Derek fall. It was having my daughter back. Holding her. Laughing with her again. Hearing her say Dad without bitterness in her voice. Watching her sit at my kitchen table eating cereal like she used to when she was 10. Seeing her look at me without the fog of someone else's manipulation clouding her vision. That was my victory. That was my justice. Derek, he paid the price of his own doing. He faced consequences he created with his own hands. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I celebrated getting my family back, or at least the part of it that mattered most. Because revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's peace. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's a daughter sitting beside you again after years of distance, holding your hand with tears in her eyes and whispering, I know the truth now, and I love you, Dad. That right there, that was the real revenge. Today, Emily lives just 10 minutes from me, close enough that I can see her headlights turn into my driveway whenever she swings by after work, close enough that I can hear her laugh through my screen door before she even steps inside. There's something healing about that, something steadying, something that reminds me that no matter how far we drifted, no matter how many years were stolen by lies, the heart remembers where it belongs. Every Sunday without fail we have dinner. Sometimes she cooks, sometimes I do, and sometimes we just order takeout because life gets busy and we're human. But she always shows up. She walks through my front door like she never stopped belonging there. She wanders into my kitchen, pops open my fridge like she pays the bills there, and grabs a soda while complaining about her week. And every single time, without missing a beat, she steals my fries. Just like she used to when she was little. I pretend to be annoyed, tell her she's too grown to keep stealing her old man's food, but truthfully, I cherish it. That tiny act of familiarity, that remnant of who we used to be before manipulation tore us apart, feels like glue filling in the cracks. We are rebuilding. Slowly, steadily, brick by brick. The same way I rebuilt my life after the divorce, after the betrayal, after waking up every day wondering where I went wrong. Some days she opens up more than others. She tells me about her job, her clients, her co-workers. She talks about the therapy she started, the guilt she's working through, the anger she didn't realize she still carried. And sometimes, when her guard drops just a little, she asks the questions that have been living in her chest since she was a kid. She'll sit across from me, pushing her hair behind her ear, eyes soft but searching, and she'll say, "Dad, why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you defend yourself? Why didn't you tell me everything?" And every time, I give her the same answer. Gentle, honest, simple. Because I trusted you, find the truth when you were ready. At first, she didn't understand. She frowned, frustrated, confused. Because the world teaches us that love is loud, defensive, urgent. That if you truly care, you yell, you fight, you claw your way into someone's belief. But that's not love. Not real love. Not the kind that survives storms. I didn't fight Samantha. I didn't fight Derek. And I didn't fight Emily. Because love doesn't force. Love waits. Love believes the truth will rise when it's time. Was it painful? God, yes. Some nights I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if Emily would ever call me again. Some mornings I'd pick up the phone just to put it back down because the silence between us felt too big to bridge. Some holidays I'd sit alone at my kitchen table, chewing food I couldn't taste, staring at the empty chair where she used to sit swinging her legs. But I never hated her. I never blamed her. I never resented her for believing the version of me Derek and Samantha painted. Because children believe the adults they love. Even when the adults are wrong. Even when the adults are driven by fear, pain, or their own selfishness. And life has a strange, poetic way of peeling back the layers people try to hide. The truth always finds the cracks. Always. Just like it found its way into that church. Just like it found its way into Emily's hands when she stumbled onto those messages. Just like it found its way into her heart when she looked at me for the first time without the fog of manipulation blurring her vision. No lie lasts forever. No manipulation stays buried. And no distance, not years, not silence, not confusion, is too great for a child to eventually see the truth about their father. Sometimes the world tries to split families apart. Sometimes it succeeds for a while. Sometimes it leaves scars. But truth is stubborn. Truth is patient. Truth is louder than any lie whispered in the dark. As for Derek, well, let's put it this way. When you build your life on betrayal, when you build your marriage on manipulation, when you build your reputation on lies, when you build your success on stepping over the people who trusted you, Eventually, you become the architect of your own downfall. He thought he was destroying me. He thought he was winning. He thought he could rewrite everyone's truth and walk away clean. But men like that always forget one thing. Lies are temporary. Truth is permanent. And the truth is this. I'm not the man Derek said I was. Emily knows that now. Samantha knows that now. Hell, the whole town knows that now. And me, I got my daughter back. I got peace. I got my life returned to me without lifting even one vengeful finger. That is the resolution. That is the justice. That is the moral buried inside all this heartbreak. Real revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about rising without them. It's about letting truth do the work. It's about letting time reveal character. It's about becoming whole again, or the person who wronged you drowns in the mess they made. Because at the end of the day, truth wins, love returns, and karma, well, she never forgets an address.